Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and we are at Sunday the 4th of August. There is a new moon today in Leo and I believe Neptune is in a very, good morning Alex. I believe Neptune's in a very odd place today as well. There seems to be a possibility of like people making mountains out of molehills kind of thing. There's kind of an energy there where Neptune is making some things kind of fuzzy. And certainly it's a fuzzy day out. I mean, I'm looking outside and I'm like, ugh, it's like I want to wake up and see like the sky turning blue in the morning, not everything just being this flat, white and gray. It's like I'm dressed in connection with the weather out there. But I mean, things will get better, I think, by later this week coming up. So, so there's that. We will start moving into fall weather. So that's, just gotta wait. And, yesterday, I did have people join me for the dream workshop yesterday. It was a small group, but it was actually just enough time for the people who were there. So we managed to get through all dreams that wanted to be discussed. So I'm going to say thank you to the people who joined me for that. And it was good to have a group because then everybody could kind of give each other insights on, what on the dream material. And sometimes what I found is that sometimes I might start with something and then somebody else would join in and say, well, this is how I saw it. And then a third person would say, well, this is how I saw it. And then I was able to go, oh, you know what? Thinking about what those two said, yeah, there's also this, this, and this. So kind of everybody together was kind of able to pull things together. And it becomes a mode of amplification where we're able to look at, where we're through everybody kind of putting different input, everybody's kind of able to get to the big picture to some degree. So I think there was a lot of assistance in trying to figure out what those meant for people without getting too personal into people's personal lives and stuff. I mean, of course, some people, they don't mind telling what's going on, but, it's all varies there. So, yeah. So today, obviously tomorrow, good morning, JR. Obviously, I was going to, I'm not going to be here tomorrow because I'm going to be going into New York. And apropos to that, and kind of apropos to what my topic was for today that I want to talk about, is I had a very odd dream last night where Azrael was in the dream because I heard his voice. So, it was like I had been at some kind of an event that it was partially like it was like a big celebration, like could have been like, I mean, I didn't really see bride or groom, but kind of like a wedding type celebration. And it was I had this kind of like celebration going on, and but as it turns out, it was really more like a conference, and I was there with my ex, okay, who I haven't seen since the year 2001. But anyway, he was there, and it was like, but there was so many people there that it was like he was sitting in one place. It was almost like the chairs. Like if anybody's ever been to, if you go to a train station, or if you go to like I'm thinking, Paddington comes to mind in London, or probably just other ones where you have kind of like those seats, but they might be, or even on like, sometimes on the subways and stuff, you have like these partitioned off seats. And it was like, there were those kinds of seats, like in rows. And he was sitting somewhere, and I was like in a different room. And I feel like whoever it was, because there was this woman, this very professional looking woman who was kind of running the whole show. But I felt like, oh God, it was like already getting to nighttime, but somehow we still had an hour and a half of business that we had to do. And I was like, there was an agenda. I was like, oh God. So I was like, well, because apparently, and it reminded me of when I worked for Morris County, but this time when I worked for the technology division, it was sort of for the libraries, but it was in the technology division. And so I was there with what I feel like were some of my coworkers, and he was like in the other room. And then at some point it was like getting really late, and I guess I guess all the business had been gone through, but there was a last speaker, like a keynote speaker, and they said, oh, the keynote speaker's not coming on until 1, so you guys can just, if anybody just wants to leave, they can leave, because it's not gonna. And it's weird because everybody was deciding they wanted to leave at that point because they were they didn't want to wait around for this. And there was one person saying, well, maybe I'll just have to talk to myself in this one. So I don't know, something was going on with that. But I went out to go find my ex because apparently he was driving. He wasn't there. And I started to get really annoyed. I'm like, did he just go ahead and leave me here with no mode of transport? So I was texting. At that point, I had a phone, which I wouldn't have had in 2001. But anyway, I was texting, or even earlier than that. So, and it turns out I wasn't texting him. I was texting my sister. The sister who I have two. There are two sisters. I said there's the one I talk to and the one that I don't. This is the one that I talk to. And I got a text back from her saying like, oh yeah, I got tired, so I just left, kind of thing. And I'm like, well, that's great. I was feeling really angry in this dream that it was just like, excuse me, like at least come try to find me if you need to leave or whatever. Like that I just was like really annoyed by it. But somehow I was back in what I thought of as my house, but it was a stone house, and my house is not made out of stone. It was, but it looked like a house that I had seen. I think I was reminded of houses that I see down in Stockton, New Jersey, which are like these stone, like there's the Pralsville Mills. There's like a stone house there. It kind of reminded me of that. And I was in the house, and earlier in the dream, I saw what looked like a unicorn. Okay, this unicorn had kind of appeared. And it seems like it had been, like years had gone by, and now it was like I heard a voice, and it was Azrael's voice. And he was telling me that this unicorn was in the road. Like I was looking out, I could see some kind of a bright light. It was dark out, but I could see this bright light. And it was almost like telling me this unicorn. But he used a different word that I was like, what is he using this word for? And so apologies for using it, because now a lot of people consider this word to be a slur word. But he used the word mongoloid. Okay, and I was not referring to anybody with Down syndrome or anything like that, which I know that was a term that was used for those children for years, and now it's like, no, we don't use that term. It's a very old, like, disparaging term, and I'm not using it in that context. I don't want anybody to think that I would do that. I do remember people using that term when I was a kid, but, I mean, like a lot of things, there's a lot of terms that turn over and change. But it wasn't referring to that. And so I was looking it up, I'm like, how else was this used? And apparently in anthropology, it was a term, they talked about like anywhere from 2 to 5 different races. But Mongoloid basically referred to anybody from Asia. And I'm like, is that what is he talking about, an Asian person? Which could be anybody from, China, Japan, could also be from India. Like, it was like kind of this kind of area. And actually they said even some Native Americans were considered to be part of that group as well. And I was like, why is he using that word? I mean, and he was using it to refer to a unicorn. And then later on, I did some clarification in the morning, and then there was another part to the dream that I won't get into after that. But I was just like, why? What are you referring to here? And finally, I kind of got him down to, my guru is coming, and she's from India. And I'm like, that's not a term you use to describe somebody from India. It was just like, but it's weird. But that was the angelic term that they were using, because they're kind of referring to humans, like identifying humans in that way, which I thought was weird. But they identify her as a unicorn, meaning she's something special. She's not like the others. It was that kind of a thing, like a unicorn is like a very mystical animal. I mean, I guess it's a national animal of Scotland, right? But it's the idea that this animal, this is like something that is very beautiful, rare, and unique, but comes from this particular region. And I'm like, yeah, people don't use that word. But anyway, remember, this is dream language, so it's just like that was just really odd to me. But then again, Enochian has some weird words in it too. So in any case, there seemed to be a reference to something when I go to see my guru tomorrow. And actually, JR has joined me, and actually I think you had read for me this week, and you thought that was going to be important as well. I remember you saying that there was something about that. Because to me, I'm like, okay, I haven't seen her in several years. I'm just going to go. I don't really have any expectations of anything but the normal darshan, and, and I still don't have any other expectations other than that, because I always feel like, even if I'm being told that there's going to be something significant, I feel like it's better not for me not to let the mind get involved and start thinking about what it might be. I might just, okay, we'll go tomorrow and we'll see what's what. So, yeah, so my dream. But the reason I mentioned my dream is because there's something about it that kind of dovetails into the topic I had for today, which has to do with this particular card. Okay, this is the Tower, right? And it's interesting because you have this image here. Okay, so first of all, you have this tower that's built up to the sky, and there's obviously a model for that. There's the lightning bolt that comes down, and you see that the people in this tower are in blue and in red. So these typically are the colors associated with masculine and feminine energy when you see them represented in this way. Like if you look at Jung's picture that is supposed to represent the alchemical syzygy between the masculine and feminine, you'll see a woman who's in blue with sort of the moon over her head or crowned with the moon, and you'll see a man dressed in red or orange kind of colors who's crowned with the sun. And here we kind of have these kinds of images. It's interesting though because they kind of have they both kind of have elements of the opposite. You know what I mean? Like this person in red also has blue, and this person with blue also has some red. So that kind of gets back to the story of the Tower of Babel, which I wanted to refresh myself on, and what it is, because I've heard different versions of it, and some people have even said that those who built the Tower of Babel were the Nephilim, were these like super beings, these giants, and so of course that makes me think of the story of the giants that wanted to, stack the mountains on top of each other to get to Mount Olympus, and how they were cast down to Tartarus. In this particular story, they basically says that all of humanity spoke one language and were one race. Okay, and they were marching from the east. Okay, now that's interesting given the dream I had last night, towards Shinar, which is actually a place in southern Mesopotamia. It's probably in the region that we now think of as more like the Babylonian type region, mainly because of people's theories about it, about what this story might have meant. And what they decide is they're going to, all the peoples of the world, because they don't want to be separated, they decide they're going to build a great city. And so there's literally an account of how they fired bricks and how they put them together, and they decided they were going to build a tower up to the sky, one of your first skyscrapers, right? And Yahweh looks down on this and says, he says, if these people can build a tower to the sky, there's no stopping what they can do. So what he does, as they're building the tower, the tower never gets built. And that's the weird thing. The tower doesn't get built. He scatters all of them and makes it so that confuses their speech so that nobody has the same language. And this is kind of an interesting thought in terms of Mercury retrograde, where there's confusion of speech. You know what I mean? It's like there's this that's where you get the term babble. And we talk about a babbling. We talk about babbling brooks and things, but the idea is that you think about a baby babbling, like it makes sounds, but it's not really saying anything that can be understood. So if you don't understand something, you just refer to it as babble, right? And of course, there's language programs called Babel because let's teach you a different language. But it was interesting. I just thought that the whole concept is interesting because, see, when we look at this representation, it's that the tower was built and God struck it down. If you read the actual biblical account, they abandoned the building of the tower and they walked away. Now, there's a ziggurat, which is kind of like I guess it's a kind of a quasi-pyramid type structure that's a little bit more rectangular, I guess, in how it's built. But anyway, the ziggurat there's one that's been built to the god Marduk. And some people think that that's the structure that's being referred to here. But I don't know that anybody can prove that. Especially since that's a completed structure. I mean, this is one that it was implied. But what I thought was interesting about the story, too, is the fact that Yahweh says, it's not so much that the idea that they're building a tower to the sky. It's almost like it's like that act of hubris, like you are trying to reach your way, humans are trying to reach their way into the heavens. And of course, in biblical thinking, you've been ejected from Eden, which we don't, in terms of physical space, geographically, they always try to locate that at the place where like the four rivers come together, right, in that area. Like it's a place on Earth. but clearly it's not a place on earth. When you're ejected from that garden, but there isn't a place where there's a gate around and said this is Eden, no entry. There's not a real thing. It's clearly a construct from in another whatever. I mean, it's not something in the space of time, so it's not really here. But somebody there, like, it's like, we're going to build this tower. And the thing is, but the thing that was troubling to Yahweh was that all humans spoke the same language. So in other words, everyone was communicating together. Everyone was on the same page. And what he does is he scatters them. Now, another interesting thing about this image is, and of course the thunderbolt does kind of make sense in that context, even though he's not actually striking the tower down in the story, because Yahweh is the god of the thunderbolt, just like Zeus is, just like Jupiter is, just like Jove is, just like Lug is from Lunasa, just like Indra is in Hinduism. They all wield the thunderbolt, and they always use it to some heroic end, typically speaking, or success in war or something like that. So, but the fact that you've got these two figures who are masculine and feminine, and it's almost like they have the colors of each other, but it's almost like now there's like a separation there. They're kind of thrown out. So really, that's interesting, because if we think about the Tower of Babel as it is, it's really a story of separation, a way in which things are confused, in which things are no longer understood. What was familiar, and now, the people you were familiar with, you can no longer communicate with now. Like, there's something that's messing it up. And it's interesting because now the tower is not typically associated with Mercury retrograde, but it has that kind of feel to it, doesn't it? Where you just feel like, or even some of the Chiron wounds, where people just, a lot of them are about not feeling like you're heard and not feeling like you're understood, which is interesting. And now the tower, when we typically think about it in regular tarot translation, we tend to think of the tower as having to do with like Uranus type energy, that which is unexpected, that which comes in out of the blue, out of our control, and just changes everything. But the change is meant to bring clarity. That's what's interesting. The actual story of the tower, the change is actually meant to bring confusion and separation. So it's interesting that we've kind of gotten around. It's almost the idea that, well, that confusion and separation is good for you, So I don't know. It makes me wonder if it's another metaphor for the creation myth, which to me is not a myth about sin. Like, in other words, Eve eating of the fruit is not a sinner. It's basically, those are the conditions that are created. It's like a trick that goes on there, but it's almost like the serpent tricks them into becoming alive. Like, in order to become alive, you can't be in this unified state. If you follow Kabbalah, it's kind of like, okay, when you talk about the top of the tree of life, you're talking about a dissolved and unified state. That's a state beyond ego, beyond identities, where you don't have individual identities. It's like concepts of nirvana or even Paramatman, where there's just no individual identity there. You are just part of this, blissful ocean, so to speak. But you're not. There's not the individual you, and the ego you present, and the language you speak, and the thoughts you have, and the experiences you have are not. They kind of dissolve. They're kind of crumbled up. They crumble up and they fall as you reach those heights. And it's almost interesting, because if we think about this Kabbalistically, you could look at this Kabbalistically, actually, even though Kabbalah is a 12th century thing. It's not like a biblical thing, but. In the sense of not being written something written at the time of the Bible, but it was, if we think about that, if you think about this as a tower that's maybe built from Malkut, which is the base of the kingdom, okay, that's the base of the tree. And that's supposed to be where the Shekinah is, the presence of God in the Holy of Holies, right? And it's the presence of God in the temple and in the world. Okay, Malkut, in the simplest possible terms, is the world. Whereas Keter is kind of this space that's beyond. And Tiferet's in the middle. Now, Tiferet is the mountaintop. They talk about, like, Moses being on Mount Sinai, right? It's the top from which you can look down and see all of the possibilities. And we do have a card like that, right? We have the Two of Wands, the card of possibilities. It's like, okay, now I can see I'm at the top of the mountain. We have all of this other stuff that has to do, and actually all the Sephirot below it, in addition to Malkut, have to do with the realm of intuition, the realm of intellect, the realm of the heart and the feeling. And now you're at this mountaintop and you're looking down. So it's almost like you've mastered all of those things. You've brought those things in balance, and now you can see the big picture. But just beyond Tiferet is Dahat, which is the abyss. And so for you to cross over into that space, like if you're saying, okay, I'm at Tiferet. I remember it was Dion Fortune, who was a famous esoteric practitioner. She used to say, well, humans can't go beyond Tiferet. Okay, Tiferet is the top point. You can't go beyond Tiferet. And the tower to me is almost like, if you metaphorically want to look at that, it's almost like trying to build your way into Keter from the king, from the bottom. And you can't build to that point. At some point, everything breaks down and dissolves. Because that dissolution means it's going to be, if you move into that space, there's a dissolution of your identity, okay? So you are not going to be the same person. So again, if we want to speak about this entirely, obviously I think it's all metaphorical terms really, because this is really just a construct for us to think about the process of creation and destruction. But when you're moving into a realm of destruction. If you make a mistake, you'll fall into the Tartarian depths. You'll fall into the abyss, which is the Saturn-ruled space in the middle of the tree. It's the invisible Sephiroth. But if you do manage to evade the abyss, then where you end up is with Binah, or Babylon, which is the area that's the element of dissolution, where what you are is ground up. Like that's Mother Kali. That's where the old you is completely gotten rid of. And if you are going to be reformed again, you kind of have to go back, and because manifestation moves from the top down in the tree. And again, there's always the reminder that the whole tree is sacred. It's not like, oh, it's bad down at the bottom and it's really great at the top. It's like they're both equally important, but the thing is, the conditions for life mean that you have to be down here. So in a certain sense, the tower may also be about being realistic and keeping your feet on the ground, right? Rather than trying to build yourself up into a space where you're no longer, and if you do manage to do that, or if it's proper for you to do that, then you have to recognize that, that does mean that you and what and what you've accomplished can all go, it all gets kind of exploded. So I don't know. I feel almost like there's more, that might be almost a better analogy there. But we go through this process all the time, because I think it's not a case of, I think a lot of times with Kabbalah, especially with initiations and things, people think, oh, I'm at this level, and now I'm at this level, and now I'm like we're walking up like stairs. And I think like a lot of things, it doesn't necessarily work like that. There could be a lot of leaps and swoops and different things that happen. But when we get to that central point, we have to be careful. They sometimes, Jung would refer to that center Tiferet point as the place of the self archetype, okay, the higher self, quote unquote. But again, there's a negative side to the higher self, and that's the Messiah complex. That's the point when somebody gets there and thinks, aha, I know everything now. I've arrived. Now everybody listen to me because I know everything. It's like, yeah, there's kind of that point, and then that person gets knocked straight down, because it's like, and even in ancient religion, there's the idea of hubris, right? You try to put yourself in the place where the gods is, and they're going to smack you down. So yeah, it's interesting. That's kind of the inflection of this card, because the Tower of Babel was something that was just literally never completed, because there was no, and it was weird because Yahweh does it through the use of language. He doesn't do it through throwing lightning bolts at people. He does it through messing up their language. And when you think about that, that's the way in which our intellect is messed with. A lot of times, I know one aspect of the dream I had last night was that it was almost like the angels were laughing, because they're like, the thing that's really blocking you here is your intellect. You're not, you're moving into basically it was like I was moving into a space where it's like, okay, now you have to move through this space, like it's a blackness, like you're not seeing anything, because this is not how you see. You see a different way, right? That was kind of the message I got. You see in this space, you see in a different way. You don't see with your eyes. And but they almost find it amusing, because it's almost like you get yourself tied up in knots. We kind of, the mind gets us tied up in knots. Our language, our discourse, our speech it can bring clarity, and it can also bring a lot of confusion, because when we think we know a lot in that way, then you can mistakenly think that you know everything. That's why I think it's funny. There's at least one person who joins, and I know his name actually, because I've sent him something before from Katonia. He asked me to send him something, and I can't remember. He comes on here as a JR, but he's not JR. he's a different person. And I have to go back. I do have his name somewhere, but it was. But I remember he had said, that he'll always say to me, like, "Thank you for your wisdom," and I'm like, well, the only wisdom I have is that I know I can talk about this stuff. I can talk about the questions I have, but I just know. I know that for every, for all this little bit that I know, there's like all this that I don't know. So, and a lot of that knowing doesn't come from reading books and speaking anyway. That's a very limited form of knowledge. So it's almost like saying, I'm going to take that limited form of knowledge and I'm going to build my way to the top. And it's like, no, you're not. This is why philosophy gets itself into knots. I do remember my ex, because he was a philosophy major. By the time he had gotten to postmodernism and things like, Jean-Francois Lyotard and things like that, he's like, my brain's about to explode. Because he was somebody who was very articulate, and he said, you're philosophizing to a point where nothing makes any sense anymore. It's like literally you're arguing about whether or not a table exists. Like, you're getting to a point where your words are just not, it's reached its limit, okay? So I feel like a lot of this is kind of the element of the tower, that we've reached the limit with something, and now it's like you have to, this thing comes into, and it throws you into this unfamiliar territory where you have to learn this new language, or you have to learn this new way, because the way that you were doing it is not, it's not. It's moving towards something. It's like if you're going to move to that unified state. It's like if you're going to still be a living person, if you're still going to be alive, you can't. You're not climbing up to that unity. You have to. You're still functioning in this realm of separation with an awareness that there's a unity behind it. But then it's like it's almost like you've played the game and you've gotten to a point where you're like, okay, I'm at the end of the game, and it's like, okay, well, unless you're dead, you got to keep playing the game. So you're not going to reach that point. You have to, things get rearranged and you kind of keep going. So anyway, I'm hoping a lot of that makes sense. Let's see what our reading is for today. But I felt that especially. And I know I was watching some reading the other day, and I have to say, I've had so much going on. I had to do I'd record 3 readings yesterday. I got to record 3 today. Everything's got to go up today and be ready. I've already posted my podcast to my patrons on Patreon. And I'm gonna post it probably tonight for everybody else, because tomorrow morning I've gotta leave like super early in the morning, like 5:30 or 6 or something for the train. So I can't make so much sense, and checks out to a few things that came up for me yesterday. Yeah, it's interesting. We're kind of in this space where it's like the thing that you know and the way that you know and how you move confidently forward with what you know. But it may be that that's not the way that you need to go forward. Because the other thing about it too, that especially with respect to that dream that I had last night, was that I felt like, again, it goes back to this book I talk about called The Black Goddess and the Sixth Sense, and the idea that it's almost like you have to have a form of learning that's not just about what you see and what you read. Like there's another form of learning that comes in, and it's almost like they're saying, okay, it's time for you to make that form of learning and stop trying to understand and interpret the world just with the eyes. It was interesting. And good morning. It's interesting. Just thinking about the dream that I had, and of course it does make me wonder what it's going to mean when I go tomorrow. But again, I'm just trying not to wonder about it. I'm like, okay, well, whatever it is, it's going to be. But, if you joined late, we just had a long discussion about the Tower card and its meaning. I'm going to do a reading right now. So let's see what our reading is for today. And I think I said this, not everybody here has been on regularly. But I'm going to probably move these live streams to 7 o'clock by the end of the month, because and maybe even later than that, later in the year, just because as it gets darker in the morning, I don't want to have all these lights on me. Right now I don't have any lights on me. That's why the lighting is kind of poor in here. But I don't, I like to have the natural light. That's kind of the point of me getting up early, is that I want to watch the sun come up, so I don't want all these, ring lights and stuff on me. I'm just like, no, I want to be able to do it. But at 6:30 in the morning soon is going to be pitch black, so I'd have to do it a little bit later. Okay, so our reading for today. Oh, this is interesting. I'm cool with the shift of the season and the live stream. Good idea. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and yesterday people said that they were pretty cool with that as well, because and also, I mean, unless you have a job where you've got to be to work at a certain time, which I know some people are, it may just be that it's not really practical for a lot of. It may not be practical for people to be on. People may, when it's dark, people may want to be sleeping. They don't want to be up trying to watch your live stream. They'd like to have some daylight. Okay, so central card we have here is the Creator. Okay, this is the King of Wands, and this is interesting because I've seen the King of Wands come up in a few readings. So this is interesting because when we were talking about the Tower, when we were talking about our Tower card, right, and the idea that this is almost like we have people who have reached that mountaintop, have reached that point of knowledge where they reached that inner self, or perhaps they reached that point of integration of the ego. But the thing is, what lies beyond it, which will be the dissolution of it. The Creator is kind of the person. This is King of Wands is that strong fire energy. It's where you reach that point where you have balanced all your faculties, where you are at a point where you are capable of action, and you are able to act from a place that is. You're able to act from a place where you are confident, where you are knowing, where you are, where you have the ability to use the talents that you have. Okay, so this is the point we start from, and the inner feeling of which we're unaware here is the Eight of Cups. It's letting go, and that does kind of fit in with the theme, because it's the idea that that whatever the next thing that you're going to move on to, whether you want to think of it as source, whether you want to think about it as your inner instincts, inner voice, whatever it is, there's a sense that. Whatever you have manifested, whatever you've achieved, the King is kind of like the culmination of the suit, right? Whatever you've achieved, there's something now that, because the Eight of Cups is a certain type of letting go. It's that letting go that says, I have achieved all of this stuff. All of these cups are still standing. They're still here. Okay, in the other deck, the Eight of Cups is a rather interesting card. Let me see if I can find it quick, because I have the Rider-Waite out today. I was using it for something else. And by the way, the readings I'm doing this week, I'm experimenting with those essential oil cards, so you'll have to see what you think of those if you watch them on my channel. Here's the Eight of Cups here, where you have the cups are all full and upright, but the seeker, he's walking away from them. He's walking away. And it's interesting because you have a moon here. Everybody always forgets that this is actually an eclipse that's going on here. So I call this the eclipse card. And this card came up quite a bit during the eclipse season. So here I feel like it's like this person, and it's interesting because the cups are on dry land, but there's almost like water. He had to almost step over the water to get into this next section and to move on. It's like there's a crossing of something. You have to make this crossing, and you have to move over. But it's a kind of, and I think we were talking, actually it came up in the dream workshop yesterday. I think Ali, who was on it, she had said, she's like, John, she noticed that with the dreams, with stuff, because we were doing some readings and stuff with the dreams, and she had said the number 8 keeps coming up a lot. And I think 8 has come up before. So there's this 8 energy, but it's letting go of what you've already accomplished, letting go of what is familiar, what is comfortable. Okay. Yes, all of this was great. All of this served me. Now I have to leave it behind. Okay? But the external feeling of which we are aware is the Queen of Clouds. Okay? This is the morality card. What we should and shouldn't do. And of course, if we have this wonderful thing, why should we walk away from it? Right? Why should you, why would you not want to just continue on? Why would you not want to continue building that tower? Why would you not do that, right? Because we do have a system that kind of tells us that if you think about it, if you're in a job that, say, has good money, pays good money, and your health benefits, you have all this stuff, and then you decide, I'm really not happy here. This is really not where I belong anymore, and I want to go. And people go, "What? Are you crazy? You have a good job with benefits. You should wait until you're going to retire." You always hear this kind of stuff, right? You should stay in one place, right? Stay in one place. And the thing is, there's this tension between knowing you need to let go. And again, it doesn't just specifically have to be about a job, but that's just an example of what it is, where we know that there's something that we've always defaulted to, that it's like, okay, this is not going to work going forward, okay? In order for us to creatively move on to do whatever it is that we're going to do next. And it's interesting because the next card that shows up is the Seven of Wands, which is shown as the stress card here. So what you see is this guy who's juggling like all of these candles, and he's blowing a horn, and he's on top of a ball, right? And there's a monkey, like it's like a balloon, actually. He's bouncing on one foot on a balloon, and this monkey down here is actually about to take a pin and pop the balloon and bring the whole thing down, which is interesting because that's almost like another version of the tower, right? Like somebody, that's almost another way to look at it. And Seven of Wands has come up a lot for people recently because it's the stress of, I've got all these irons in the fire, and I've got to make everything work, and I've got to do it perfectly. I have to be on top of everything. I have to be on top of my game all the time. There's no time for taking a break, a time out. No, I have to be on top of what I'm doing all the time, And then, as they said, watch out that monkey doesn't pop that balloon. But really what the meaning of this card, again, in the book, if you read this one, I remember it was something just kind of like, whatever you do, go out and do something unimportant. So in other words, there's the idea that we think everything that we have to do all of these things because they are important. I've always considered my mom to be almost one of the ultimate people that illustrates this point, because even when my father was ill and she was taking care of him, which was kind of her whole, I mean, she's one of those people she doesn't have a whole lot of identity outside of mom energy and wanting to take care of people. So now that she's at a point that she needs to take care of herself, she doesn't know how to do that. But she would find all these tasks to do. Like my sister, they would bring him home from dialysis. My mother would bring him home. My sister would have dinner made because he was diabetic and he needed to eat like when he got home. And the thing is, my father always had a thing that he would never eat until my mother was sitting at the table with us. He would not start until she was sitting down. So they'd have food on the table, and my mother would go, "Oh, I'll be right back." And she'd decide that this was the time that she had to vacuum the entire basement. Like, for no reason. There's absolutely nothing important about it. There was no reason to do it. My sister felt like it was almost like a passive-aggressive thing. Like, we'll have dinner when I say we're going to have dinner, But she doesn't say that. But, and it used to really get on my sister's nerves and her husband's nerves. Because it was at my father's expense. I mean, and I'm sure if you ask her, like, there's no malice towards my father, but at all. But it was just like, she was just like, "Oh, well, I've got to get this done." Or she'd be like, "Oh, well, I can't do that today because I have to go and I have to pick the crabgrass out of the lawn." Like, very unimportant stuff that was just like, what are you doing? Like, no, this is totally not important, and there are definitely way more important things. And good morning, Joanne. We're just talking about this reading. Quick run through. We started with the creator. This was about the tower today, so you may want to go back and review this one because it's a little bit interesting discussion. Letting go is the internal. Morality, Queen of Clouds, is the external. Achy morning. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it is kind of a weird morning this morning. I was a little discombobulated when I got up. Okay, so anyway, we were talking about the Seven of Wands as a stress card. This is almost going to be like a mini tower. But in the Rider-Waite deck, we see that as a person who's standing there with their wand, like against all the people with the staves who are kind of just beneath him. And it's interesting that they're kind of he's on the top of the hill, and it's almost like, I've made my way to the top of the hill. I'm going to fight you, I'm going to maintain all of this, and I'm going to do all of this and maintain it. So, yeah. So, and good morning. But our outcome card here is the Ten of Swords, is the rebirth card. And as I've mentioned before, this is that Nietzschean story of you can kind of see it here. It's kind of dark, but you see the camel at the bottom here that turns into a lion that turns into a child. And this is from Thus Spake Zarathustra. I'll try to say that slowly because trying to say it too fast is not going to work. And so, yes, but what does the Ten of Swords mean? Something's ending. Something's coming to an end. We have to let go of something because its time is up. You know, we can't keep this doesn't jive. We can't keep doing this. You can't. But you keep the external world and what you see externally and maybe what your thought process is that maybe you're aware of is, but I have to keep doing it. It's the right thing to do. Morality. I must keep doing it this way. I must keep doing it this way. So it gives us kind of almost a different sense, like I said, of the tower. And that in order to kind of preserve our thing, we must build this tower. And as I mentioned earlier, it's because Yahweh he doesn't actually strike the tower with a lightning bolt if you read the biblical text. What he does is he says, they all speak one language and now they all speak different ones. And therefore they can't understand each other, they get scattered throughout the earth, and then they can't continue to build this tower. So what's scrambled there is the intellect. And oftentimes we don't need some external God to do that. We're very good at doing that ourselves. We can scramble ourselves in our own frequency with our intellect. But that's probably why the tower ends up being a moment of clarity, because once you get confused and scrambled and you have to reorient yourself, then you kind of start to recognize why maybe what you were doing was kind of putting you on this path of that was not going to lead to anywhere good, really. I mean, you can't climb to the heavens without that dissolution. And I find myself also thinking about with that it just reminded me of something else. Actually, most Hindu mythological stories with the Asuras, which are what they call demons, but they're not demons in the same sense that we think of them. The Ashuric way of being is the idea that Asuras kind of start out maybe with the same morals and principles as Devas. They're a bit different. But what they're doing is they're aspiring to reach a certain point. And once they have practiced spiritual practices and things, and then they're granted a boon by Brahman or by Shiva, that's kind of that point, right? Where they reach that Tiferet point, they reach that middle point. Then they decide that they need to take over everything and oppress everything. You know, it's that Seven of Wands energy. I need to be the one on top. And so and that's the point at which that's actually when the divine feminine comes in. That's when the deity will come in one of her forms as a warrior, one of her, and the Shaktis come in, and they take out the Asuras and their armies. And oftentimes it's represented by the cutting off of the head, because the cutting off of the head means, to me, that's the same as scrambling your language. It's just like we're cutting the head off. We're cutting off that part of you that think. We always think the brain is the center of everything. And the brain, we're Homo sapiens, right? Sapiens has to do with, as a species, sapien is about the intellect. We're all about the intellect, and that's what makes us different from other species. But we privilege that intellect, and we have other forms of intellect that we don't develop and that we neglect. So when those become too big of a tower, they get knocked down. So anyway, just some interesting thoughts today. I hope this reading was helpful, useful. Thank you as always for joining me. For the people who joined late, just so you know, like I said, I'm talking about moving this to 7 a.m. soon, but I will post something on Instagram before they do it. I'll try to give it like a few days notice so people know that the shift is going to be happening. But very useful. Thank you. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. And so, thank you. And there you go. Thank you for your wisdom. Yeah. It's funny, I made a comment about that earlier. But you're welcome. So, yes, so I will see you guys. Well, I won't see you tomorrow. I'll be back on Tuesday. I will upload all this stuff along with the videos, so all that will be live probably by tonight because, because tomorrow I need a completely clean slate. Absolutely, thank you. Sure. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. I know you were joining a little late, but the recording is going to be here on Instagram, and I'll be up on YouTube as well. So, have fun tomorrow. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was, well, go back and rewatch the beginning, and you'll hear a little bit about that. So, So anyway, all of you have a great Sunday, and I hope you have a great start to your week, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Take care.